A scorching afternoon in Colorado. A pickup truck tearing into Sun Peak Woods. A 7-month pregnant woman forced into the back seat by her husband and his mistress before she can even scream for help. But what happens next is what shocks the entire nation. They drag her out of the truck, tie her tightly to a tree under the burning sun, and live stream her desperate struggle for the whole world to see. They think no one will know. They think no one will come. But they have no idea her mother is watching the live stream. And they have no idea how fast justice will strike when the truth explodes in broad daylight. What follows is a fight for survival, raw courage, and a courtroom showdown you will not forget. Let us know what time you are listening and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We would love to hear from you. The afternoon sun in Beacon Ridge had a sharp, unforgiving brightness that made everything look too real. Sun Peak Woods, normally cool and peaceful under the shade of tall pines, felt exposed under the harsh light that cut through the branches. Birds had gone silent, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. In the middle of that brittle stillness, a pickup truck rolled to a sudden stop, tires grinding against dirt and scattered pine needles. The passenger door flew open, and Hannah Miles stumbled out, one hand clutched instinctively to her swollen belly as the other tried to shield her eyes from the glare. Evan Miles came into view a moment later. His face was tight with irritation rather than concern, the kind of expression a man wore when dealing with a problem he believed he had been forced to handle. Brittany Cole stepped out behind him, clicking her tongue with impatience, her sunglasses gleaming in the sunlight. She looked more like someone heading to a summer outing than a woman about to commit an act that would horrify anyone who witnessed it. She held a phone in her hand, already set to record, her lips curling with a satisfied smirk. Hannah tried to back away, but Evan grabbed her arm and yanked her forward. Her breath hitched as pain shot through her abdomen. 7 months pregnant and already dehydrated from the heat, she struggled to stay steady on her feet. Her hair clung to her temples, damp from sweat. She whispered Evan's name, hoping for even a flicker of the man she once loved. Evan refused to look at her. His jaw clenched as he pulled her toward a tall pine tree with rough bark and low branches. Brittany lifted her phone higher. "Start talking," Brittany ordered in a sing-song voice. "Tell everyone what a liar you are." Hannah's voice cracked. "Please, stop. I did nothing to you." "That is not what he thinks," Brittany said. "And everyone deserves to know the truth, right?" She tapped the screen. The live stream began. Comments started appearing immediately from unsuspecting viewers who had no idea what they were watching. Brittany angled the camera dramatically toward Hannah's terrified face. The sunlight struck Hannah's features with unkind clarity, highlighting the fear, the sweat, the trembling of her hands as she tried to protect her stomach. Without hesitation, Evan grabbed a length of rope from the bed of the truck. He wrapped it around Hannah's wrists and pulled hard. She winced sharply as the fibers scraped her skin. The rope was rough, old, and dry, from years of being tossed in the back of the truck. He looped the rest around the tree trunk, jerking it tight until Hannah could barely move. Her breathing turned shallow as her back pressed against the bark. "Evan, please," she whispered. "It is too hot. I can barely breathe." That is your problem," he replied. Brittany laughed and stepped closer. "Smile for the viewers. You wanted attention. Now you have it." Hannah blinked rapidly, her vision beginning to blur from the intensity of the heat. She tried to shift her weight to relieve pressure on her abdomen, but the rope held her in place. The sun pressed down on her cheeks and neck like a heavy hand. Her lungs tightened. Every breath felt thin. She could feel her body screaming for water, for shade, for help. At that exact moment, miles away, her mother kneeled beside her rose bushes, trimming a branch with careful hands. Elaine Carter had planned a quiet afternoon. She wiped sweat from her forehead, reached for her watering can, and heard her phone buzz on the patio table. The screen showed a notification from the family sync app linked to Hannah's account. The thumbnail looked strange. Sunlight, trees, a woman's shape. Elaine tapped the notification. The video opened, and for a moment, she could not breathe. Her daughter stood bound to a tree, face flushed from the heat, eyes wide with terror. Behind her, Brittany's voice filled the speakers, cruel and mocking. Evan moved into frame, adjusting the rope as if tuning an instrument. Hannah begged softly. Her voice cracked in a way Elaine had never heard. It cut straight through her chest. Elaine dropped the watering can. Water splashed across the patio in chaotic arcs. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she fumbled for her keys. She sprinted to her car, her heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat. She dialed 911 while turning the ignition. "My daughter," she cried. "My daughter is pregnant, and they tied her to a tree. They are live streaming it. They are in Sun Peak Woods. Send help now." Her voice broke, but she kept driving. The gravel road shook the car violently as she pushed faster than she should have. Sunlight flickered through the trees like shards of glass. Every second mattered. Every minute felt stolen from her daughter's life. She clutched the steering wheel tightly, whispering Hannah's name, praying she was still conscious, praying the rope had not cut off circulation, praying the heat had not overwhelmed her already stressed body. Back in the woods, the live stream continued. Hannah's head dropped forward as a wave of dizziness washed over her. She tried to keep her eyes open, to stay awake, to protect the life inside her. The ground blurred, her lips dried. The world around her shimmered like a mirage. Evan stepped back, satisfied with his work. Brittany moved the camera closer, the sunlight hitting the lens and creating a harsh glare that washed over the screen. "Look at her," Brittany said. "Look at what she does for attention." Hannah whispered again. "Please, the baby, please." Her voice was nearly inaudible. The camera shook slightly as Brittany kicked the stand to reposition it. The screen flashed white from the sunlight, and everything went unstable for a moment. The glare consumed the image. The world teetered on the edge of something terrible. The live stream flickered. The heat pressed down on Hannah with a weight that felt heavier than her own body. Her breath came in shallow bursts, each one thinner than the last. Sweat gathered along her hairline and trickled down her cheeks, mixing with the dust that clung to her skin. The rope around her wrists rubbed deeper as she tried to shift her stance, but every movement only tightened the knot Evan had pulled a few minutes earlier. Her vision swayed slightly, and the sunlight above her seemed to vibrate in a way that made it hard to focus on anything more than a few feet away. Evan stood several steps back, watching her with a look that blended irritation and a strange, cruel satisfaction. He crossed his arms and glanced at Brittany, who continued to hold the phone in front of her face, making sure the live stream remained steady. She angled the camera deliberately, adjusting the frame to capture Hannah's flushed cheeks and trembling posture. The bright afternoon light made every detail harshly visible. There was no mercy in the sun that beat down from above, no shade to soften the situation or protect Hannah from the direct heat. Brittany let out a short, amused laugh as she zoomed the camera closer. "Look at her," she said. "She cannot even stand straight. What happened to that confidence you had when you said you would ruin our lives?" Her tone was filled with mockery, but there was also an edge of excitement, as if this cruelty gave her a sense of control she had been craving for months. She stepped closer to Hannah and tapped the blade of a small folding knife against her palm. Hannah lifted her head slowly, her lips dry and cracked. "Please, you do not understand," she whispered. "The baby cannot handle this. I feel dizzy. I need water. I need to sit down. Please." Her voice shook, and every word felt like it was scraping its way out of her throat. She tried to take a deeper breath, but the heat pressed into her lungs, making the simple act of breathing feel painfully difficult. Evan scoffed. "You always make everything dramatic," he said. "You have been lying for months. This is what it takes for people to see who you really are." He gestured toward the camera with a careless flick of his hand. "You wanted attention. Now you have it. Maybe someone will finally understand why I cannot stay married to someone like you." Brittany lowered the knife and held it near the rope, letting the blade rest lightly against the tensioned cord. "Should we give them a little scare?" she asked, smiling. "Just enough to make the live stream go crazy." She pressed the metal a little harder, making the rope dip slightly. Hannah felt a jolt of fear that shot straight through her stomach. Her knees weakened, and she tried to lean away, but she could not move far enough to escape the threat. "Do not!" Hannah begged. "I am begging you. Think about the baby, please." Her voice cracked as she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She shut her eyes for a moment, trying to steady herself, but the sunlight seemed brighter when she opened them again. Her pulse thudded rapidly in her ears. She tried to inhale slowly, but it came out as a shaky gasp. Far away, Elaine's car sped down a dusty road, leaving a trail of swirling dirt behind it. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her fingers ached. Tears blurred her vision, and she wiped them away with the back of her wrist without slowing down. Her heart pounded with a desperate, frantic rhythm. The image of her daughter tied to a tree burned in her mind, along with the sound of Hannah's frightened voice echoing from the live stream. She dialed 911 again, her breath uneven. "Please hurry," she whispered. "She cannot take the heat. She is pregnant. She looks like she is going to faint. Please, please hurry!" The dispatcher tried to reassure her, but nothing could calm the storm of fear rising inside her chest. She pressed harder on the gas pedal, her car jolting over every bump in the dirt road as she raced into the forest. Back in the woods, Brittany glanced at the screen of her phone, noticing the number of viewers increasing. "People love this," she said with a gleam in her eyes. "Look at these comments. They think she is insane. They think she tied herself up to blame you." She laughed lightly, enjoying the attention she was getting. Hannah's breathing turned faster. Her legs began to wobble, and she leaned heavily against the tree for support. She blinked several times, trying to clear the haze forming over her vision. The world around her felt like it was tilting slightly to the left. Her stomach tightened in a painful knot. A sharp pulse of discomfort shot through her lower abdomen. Evan stepped closer. "Stop pretending," he said. "Nothing is wrong with you. If you faint, it is your own fault." His voice had lost any trace of kindness that once existed in their marriage. Instead, each word carried an icy certainty. He believed the story he was creating. He believed the lies he had been spreading for months. More importantly, he believed that the live stream would make people think Hannah was unstable. Hannah tried to speak again, but only a hoarse whisper came out. She swallowed, but her throat was too dry. She could feel her pulse racing, her thoughts scattering, her body losing strength with each passing second. She tried to lift her head, but it dropped forward again. The sunlight felt hotter, too hot. Elaine continued to run deeper into the woods. After abandoning her car near a narrow trail the vehicle could not pass. Branches brushed against her arms, but she barely felt them. She shouted her daughter's name, voice breaking from fear and exhaustion. She sprinted toward the faint sound of voices ahead, praying she would reach her in time. In the clearing, Brittany crouched to adjust the angle of the phone. Evan stepped toward the camera to read a comment, then turned and kicked the tripod lightly to shift its position. The live stream shook violently, and the screen blurred in the sudden burst of bright sunlight. The clearing in Sun Peak Woods felt even hotter as the minutes passed, as if the sunlight itself was taking sides and choosing to expose everything that had been hidden for far too long. The livestream camera sat crooked on the ground after Evan kicked it, still broadcasting the shaking image of Hannah tied to the tree. The comments scrolled rapidly. Some viewers were confused. Others were laughing. A few were asking if the scene was real. Hannah barely registered any of it. Her thoughts blurred under the pounding heat and the rising panic inside her chest. Evan crouched down in front of the phone, brushing dirt off the lens with the sleeve of his shirt. He inspected the comments as if he were reviewing something trivial, not a crime unfolding in real time. He seemed proud of the way people reacted to the video, proud of the twisted story he had been spinning for months. His breathing was steady, too steady for someone standing in the middle of something so cruel. He looked satisfied with the chaos he was controlling. Brittany stood behind him, tapping the side of her sunglasses in a nervous rhythm. Her expression was sharper now. The thrill she had shown earlier shifted to something colder, more focused. She glanced at Hannah, then at Evan, as if calculating each next move. When Evan finished checking the camera, he stood upright again, dusting off his jeans before turning toward Hannah with a hard stare. "You did this to yourself," he said. "People can see it now. There is no point pretending." Hannah lifted her head slowly, the rope scraping against her wrists again. "I did nothing," she whispered. "You know I did nothing." Her voice was stronger than before, but only slightly. She struggled to keep her balance. Her legs trembled uncontrollably, her body pleading for rest, for shade, for mercy. Each heartbeat echoed in her ears with a slow, painful thud. Brittany stepped closer, lowering her sunglasses just enough so Hannah could see her eyes. They held no sympathy. "You should have kept quiet," she said in a low voice meant only for Hannah. "We gave you chances. You ruined everything. Evan deserves better than a woman who tries to trap him." Hannah's breath caught. "Trap him? How could I trap my own husband? I am carrying his child." Brittany leaned in until her face was only a foot away. "That is what you say." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But everyone knows you cannot handle being alone. You would say anything to keep him. People will believe us once this video goes viral." The lies echoed through the clearing. They felt heavier than the heat. Hannah's stomach tightened painfully as her fear deepened. She tried to shift her stance to relieve the pressure, but she barely moved an inch. The rope held firm. Evan walked toward the truck and pulled out a dirty cloth. "We need to make the scene look real," he said without turning around. "If anyone shows up, they need to think she did this herself. That way, it all matches what we said before." He wiped sweat off his forehead and glanced back at Hannah. "She has always been dramatic. Everyone knows that. She will look unstable. They will think she did this because she wanted attention." Hannah forced a breath through her tightening chest. "Why are you doing this? You are my husband. You know I have never lied to you." Her voice cracked as a weak tremor ran through her legs. "Please, stop. I cannot breathe. The baby cannot breathe." Evan froze for a moment. The slightest flicker of hesitation crossed his face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Brittany noticed the shift and stepped closer to him. She rested her hand on his arm gently. "Do not let her trick you again," she said. "You know how she is. We talked about this. She uses emotions to control you. You said so yourself. She did the same thing when she cried at the dealership and made you feel guilty about the loan. She always manipulates you." Evan's jaw tightened again. "She did. She always does." Hannah heard their whispered exchange and felt a sharp ache in her chest that had nothing to do with the heat. "Evan, you are not thinking clearly," she said, trying to steady her breath. "This is not you. This is wrong. I never tried to control you. I only wanted our family to be safe." "Yeah." Brittany laughed quietly. "Family, you had your chance. You ruined it when you started telling people he was cheating. You should not have said anything. If you had stayed quiet, we would not be here." The sunlight flickered across Brittany's sunglasses. Her expression hardened further. She stepped even closer to Hannah until they were nearly eye to eye. She whispered so softly that only Hannah could hear. "If you disappear, everything gets easier." Hannah's breath caught sharply, and her body froze. The world around her seemed to tilt for a moment. The trees blurred at the edges. Her pulse stuttered. She could not tell if the ground was shaking or if her vision was failing again. Brittany pulled back, smiling faintly, as if she had just shared a secret. She walked over to Evan and touched his shoulder lightly. "She is getting worse," Brittany said. "She looks unstable. Anyone who sees this will think she tied herself up because she is hysterical. We just need a few more minutes of footage, then we will delete everything on our phones and say she had an episode." Evan nodded. "That will work. People already think she makes things up." Hannah could barely hear them now. A ringing sound pulsed in her ears. She felt sweat dripping down her back. The heat pressed against her chest like a weight. She tried to take a deeper breath, but her lungs refused to expand fully. Her vision flickered again, the treetops swaying in a strange, disjointed rhythm. She remembered Elaine's voice, her mother's laughter during morning coffee, the way her hands always felt steady and warm. She clung to that memory as her legs weakened again. Far away on the trail, Elaine stumbled but forced herself to keep running. She followed the faint voices, the echo of laughter, the distant murmur of the live stream playing through her phone. She could hear Brittany's mocking tone. She could hear Hannah pleading faintly in the background. The sound drove her forward with a determination that burned stronger than the sun above her. Back in the clearing, Evan tapped the phone on the ground with his shoe, adjusting the angle once more. The camera's view shifted slightly, capturing Hannah's weakening form again. The live stream trembled as his foot nudged it, and the image shook in a harsh burst of reflected sunlight. Elaine Carter pushed herself deeper into Sun Peak Woods, her breaths coming out sharp and uneven as she forced her legs to keep moving. The narrow trail beneath her feet twisted between tall pines and sun-bleached patches of earth. The afternoon light poured through the branches, painting shifting streaks across the ground, but none of its warmth reached her. All she felt was fear, breathless, urgent fear. She clutched her phone in one hand, following the small, blinking icon on the GPS that tracked the last location of her daughter's device. Every few seconds she looked at it again, terrified the signal might vanish. The woods were quiet except for the pounding of her heartbeat and the occasional rustle of leaves brushing against her arms as she ran. Sweat rolled down her forehead, but she did not stop to wipe it away. Every second she lost was another second. Hannah remained tied to a tree under the scorching Sunday. The live stream had shown enough to send waves of panic through her, but the thought of what might be happening now pushed her faster than she had ever moved in her life. Elaine stumbled on a root and caught herself against a trunk, gasping for breath. She lifted her head, listening. For a moment the woods were silent. Then she heard it. A soft, broken sound. A strained gasp. A voice she had known since the day Hannah was born. "Mom," the voice whispered faintly ahead. Elaine straightened sharply, her heart twisted painfully. She pushed forward again, moving through bushes and branches, without caring if they scratched her arms or legs. She saw bits of torn fabric snagged on thorns, a small blue hair tie Hannah often wore when cleaning the house, a scuffed shoe print dragging across the dirt. The signs grew more frequent and more desperate. They told the story of someone struggling, someone pulled, someone hurt. Ahead, the sunlight brightened through a gap in the trees, forming a glowing doorway of sorts. Elaine slowed her steps as she approached the edges of the clearing. The air grew hotter. The smell of dust and sap and sun-baked earth filled her lungs. She heard voices again, this time more clearly. "Just keep recording," Brittany said sharply. Elaine felt her stomach churn. She pressed forward until the full clearing came into view. For a moment she could not breathe. She saw her daughter tied to a tree, slumped forward, her skin flushed a deep red from the heat. The rope bit into her wrists. Her swollen belly strained against her thin shirt. Hannah's eyes were barely open, but when they lifted and met Elaine's across the clearing, something inside Elaine broke. "Hannah," she whispered, the word escaping her lips like a prayer. Then her voice rose with a force she did not know she possessed. "Hannah, I am here." Hannah's chin trembled. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. She strained against the rope. "Mom," she whispered again, her voice faint, as if she were afraid speaking too loudly would make everything worse. Elaine ran forward without any hesitation, her legs fueled by something beyond fear. Her instinct, her love, everything that made her a mother propelled her. She reached Hannah's side and cupped her daughter's face gently. The heat radiating from her skin alarmed her instantly. "You are burning up," she said softly. "Oh, sweetheart, I am here now. I am here. Breathe slowly for me." Hannah tried to inhale, but it shook with weakness. Elaine pressed her forehead against her daughter's for a moment, letting Hannah know she was no longer alone. Behind them, Brittany yanked down her sunglasses and stepped forward with a glare. "What do you think you are doing?" she snapped. Elaine turned her head slowly, her eyes sharp. "Get away from her!" Evan joined Brittany with an irritated frown. "You should not be here," he said. "You are interfering. This is not what it looks like." Elaine rose to her feet and faced them. "I saw everything," she said, her voice steady. "Your video, your threats, your lies." She pointed to the phone still lying on the ground, recording the moment. "You broadcast it to everyone. You made sure the entire world could watch what you were doing to her." Brittany scoffed. "She did this to herself. She tied herself. She wanted attention." Elaine's eyes blazed with disbelief. "You expect anyone to believe that? She is 7 months pregnant. She can barely stand. She can barely breathe." Hannah let out a weak groan behind her. Elaine immediately knelt again, checking her daughter's pulse with trembling fingers. She murmured gently, soothing her as best she could. "Hold on. Help is coming. Just hold on." The faint wail of sirens in the distance reached her ears. It echoed through the trees like a promise. A small wave of relief washed over her, but it was thin and fragile. They were still too far. Hannah's breaths were too shallow. The heat was too intense. Elaine looked at the rope and tugged it hard, but it was tied in a complicated knot. Panic rose again in her chest. "I need a knife," she said aloud. "I need something to cut this." Brittany shook her head. "You are not touching her." Elaine whipped her head toward her. "You do not get to decide that." Evan stepped between them. "Don't make this harder." Elaine rose again, her voice steady, in a way that surprised even her. "It is already hard. You made it hard. You made it cruel. You hurt my daughter. You hurt my grandchild." Evan opened his mouth to argue, but the sound of footsteps and rustling branches cut him off. The first police officers stepped into the clearing. Their uniforms gleamed in the sunlight. Their hands hovered near their holsters as they surveyed the scene with quick, trained eyes. Elaine stepped back slightly, raising her hands to show she was not a threat. "She needs help," she said urgently. "She is pregnant. She has been tied up for too long. She is dehydrated. Please." The officers rushed to Hannah, One pulled out a knife to cut the rope. Another radioed for immediate medical backup. Elaine moved aside, tears running freely as she watched them work. She kept whispering Hannah's name, trying to keep her daughter awake. Behind the officers, Evan shifted his weight nervously, glancing toward the tree line, as if considering escape. Brittany lowered her phone slowly, her confidence draining. The clearing, once filled with sunlight and cruel laughter, now felt heavy with truth. The police continued moving around them, securing the scene, assessing the injuries, gathering evidence. And as officers moved into position, their shadows stretched across the clearing, announcing that everything was about to change. The clearing remained bright under the unforgiving Colorado sun, and every second felt louder than the last. Officers moved quickly across the dirt, their boots snapping twigs and crunching through layers of dry pine needles. The voices of law enforcement rose and fell in short bursts as they secured the area, marked evidence, and coordinated with incoming units. In the middle of all the commotion, Hannah still lay on the ground beside the tree where she had been tied. Her breaths were shallow. Her skin glowed an unhealthy red. Sweat pooled at her temples and soaked the collar of her shirt. The heat clung to her like a heavy blanket she could not push away. Elaine stayed close to her daughter, keeping a protective hand on her shoulder and another shading her eyes from the Sunday. Hannah's pulse fluttered beneath Elaine's fingers. Each faint beat filled Elaine with more urgency. She looked toward the tree line often, hoping to see paramedics appear at any moment. She knew they were somewhere nearby, but navigating the tight trails and uneven ground slowed them. She could only wait and pray. Near the edge of the clearing, an officer knelt and examined something half buried in dust. He reached down and lifted a cell phone with a cracked screen. The device was scuffed, still warm from the heat. As he tapped the power button, the screen lit up faintly. A frozen frame from the live stream filled the display with distorted colors and harsh sunlight. The officer raised his eyebrows. "This must be the suspect's phone," he said to another officer who approached. "The live stream is still open. Looks like it kept recording until the battery nearly died." The second officer leaned closer. "Check for saved videos. This might be important." The first officer navigated through the gallery. His expression shifted as he scrolled. Dozens of thumbnails appeared. Most showed Hannah crying or struggling. Others showed messages, voice memos, screenshots, plans. The officer stood and immediately carried the phone to the supervising sergeant. "This is bad," he said. "There is a full trail of coordination between the suspects. They have been planning this for a while." The sergeant took the phone and scanned the contents. "Get this to digital forensics. Make copies of everything. We will need this for the report." The officer nodded and hurried toward the patrol car. At the same time, the police radio crackled to life. Dispatch relayed multiple civilian reports. "We have additional calls from residents," one voice said. Many viewers captured copies of the live stream before the feed cut out. Several have submitted screenshots to our online portal. They include timestamps and comments. The sergeant's expression hardened. "Good. That means we have witnesses. The live stream is going to be strong evidence." Another officer approached him. "Sir, a few locals even recognized that this was happening in Sun Peak Woods. They tried to pin the approximate location on a map and sent it in." He nodded. "We will follow up on each one. Keep searching for items the suspects left behind." The sergeant's voice carried through the clearing, commanding and steady. Officers fanned out across the area, tracing footprints, photographing the ground, and gathering anything that looked out of place. Every step revealed more evidence. A piece of rope fiber, a torn piece of clothing, a shoe print that did not match Hannah's. The truth was becoming visible in the harsh sunlight, piece by piece. Far from the clearing, Evan and Brittany pushed through the thick brush, trying to escape deeper into the woods. Evan's clothes were covered in dirt. His face was twisted in frustration and panic. Brittany stumbled along behind him, her breathing ragged. "This is your fault," Evan snapped. "If you had not dropped your phone, we would have been gone by now." "My fault?" Brittany shouted back. "You asked me to film it. You were the one who wanted proof she was unstable. You told me to keep recording everything." "I never told you to leave evidence," Evan said. "You should have been careful. You should have been smarter," she fired back. "You knew the live stream was risky. You wanted people to think she tied herself. But now they have everything. They have the video. They probably found the messages. They might even have the recordings." Evan spun around and pointed a trembling finger at her. "Do not say that. Do not talk about the recordings. Brittany shook her head, her hair sticking to her damp cheeks. We are not getting out of this. Do you understand that? We might as well tell the truth. Evan's eyes flashed with rage. You are not telling anyone anything! Brittany's breath hitched. For a moment, fear flickered across her face. She tightened her hold on the branch she had grabbed earlier, though she said nothing. Back in the clearing, the investigation continued. An officer knelt near the spot where Brittany had stood earlier, examining footprints in the dirt. He called out, "Their trail goes this way." They ran toward the north side of the woods. The sergeant nodded. Send 2 teams after them. They will not get far. 2 groups of officers broke off and moved into the woods with steady, coordinated steps. Elaine watched them go, hope growing inside her. She knew the officers were close. She knew they would find Evan and Brittany soon. The thought brought her a small sense of relief, but she could not rest until Hannah received real medical attention. Hannah groaned softly, shifting her weight. Elaine bent down and pressed a hand to her cheek. "I am here," she whispered. "Stay awake for me. The paramedics are coming." Hannah's lips parted slightly, but only a whisper escaped. The sun beat down on her skin, and the heat shimmered faintly around her like a dangerous halo. Elaine gently fanned her daughter with her hand, trying to give her some relief. Across the clearing, an officer reviewed the live stream on his tablet. Civilians had already submitted several clips. Each one was clear and detailed. The officers could see Evan tying the rope. They could see Brittany threatening Hannah. They could hear their voices, their words, their intent. "It is all here," the officer said. "Everything they did, everything they planned. They filmed it themselves." The sergeant nodded grimly. They destroyed their own alibi. The sunlight continued to pour over the clearing, revealing every truth the suspects had tried to hide. Nothing remained in shadows. Nothing remained protected. Evidence lay everywhere, scattered in the dirt like pieces of a puzzle that finally made sense. And as the officers continued to uncover each piece, one undeniable fact became clearer with every passing moment. Evan and Brittany's plan was collapsing in broad daylight. The afternoon sun bore down on the clearing with relentless heat. The ground shimmered as if the air itself were trembling. Dust drifted above the trampled earth where Hannah had fought for her life only minutes earlier. Now she lay on her side near the base of the tree, her breaths thin and unsteady. The rope that once trapped her hung loose beside her, frayed where the officer had cut it. Sweat pooled across her skin, and her shirt clung to her as if it weighed her down. Her eyelids fluttered as she struggled to stay conscious. Elaine stayed close beside her. She knelt in the dirt without hesitation, one hand cupping Hannah's warm cheek, while the other shielded her daughter's eyes from the blazing sunlight. "Stay with me," she whispered softly. "Do not close your eyes. You need to stay awake." The fear in her voice trembled beneath her words, yet she kept her expression steady for her daughter's sake. The clearing buzzed with movement as officers spread out. Their radios crackled. Branches rustled as they searched for evidence and scanned the surrounding woods for signs of movement. The noise blended together until the clearing felt alive, vibrating with urgency. Then, suddenly, a loud crashing sound echoed from the left side of the woods. Elaine's head snapped up. Branches snapped violently. Footsteps pounded across the brush. A figure burst through the tree line at full speed, stumbling into the sunlight. It was Brittany. Her face was smeared with dirt. Her clothes were torn. Her breaths came in sharp gasps as she clutched a thick branch in her right hand. She spun around, panic clear in her eyes, as if she had been running blindly without knowing where she was going. When she saw the clearing, she froze for a split second. Then her expression twisted into something furious and wild. She took several uneven steps forward, gripping the branch so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Elaine immediately rose to her feet and positioned herself between Brittany and her daughter. "Do not take another step," she warned, voice low but unshaken. "You will not touch her again." Brittany's breath caught and then released in a desperate, shaking exhale. "You think you can stop this?" she said. Her voice cracked under the strain. "You think you can protect her after what she has done? She destroyed everything." "She is 7 months pregnant," Elaine said steadily. "Everything that happened here today was your choice, and you will not get near her." Before Brittany could answer, another explosion of movement came from the opposite side of the clearing. Evan crashed through the brush with a violent shove, tripping over an exposed root before catching himself. His chest heaved as he whipped around, scanning for an escape. Dirt streaked his face and shirt. His eyes darted wildly between the officers in the distance and the open clearing in front of him. He did not seem to recognize where he was until he saw Hannah lying on the ground and Elaine guarding her. His jaw tightened. Then anger, fear, and disbelief rushed across his face all at once. "No," he muttered. "Not here. Not now." He tried to back up, but the officers behind him shouted for him to stop. He panicked and moved forward instead, stumbling into the clearing toward Elaine. Elaine widened her stance. "Stay back," she said sharply. Evan lifted a hand as if to silence her. "You do not understand," he said. "I need to get out of here. Brittany, let's go." Brittany snapped her head toward him. "We cannot go," she shouted. "They surrounded the whole forest. We are trapped." Evan stepped toward her. "We can run. Just move." "Where?" she cried, pointing to the officers closing in behind the trees. "They are everywhere." The tension thickened. Hannah let out a soft groan behind Elaine, drawing both Evan's and Brittany's eyes toward her. The sight of her struggling to breathe under the harsh daylight caused a flicker of shock to cross Evan's face. Then frustration swallowed it. "This is her fault," he said through clenched teeth. Elaine's voice cut through the heat like a blade. "You tied her to a tree. You filmed her. You humiliated her. You nearly killed your own child." "That was not the plan," Evan snapped. "She was supposed to admit what she did. She was supposed to stop lying." "She told the truth," Elaine said. "You two just could not handle it." Brittany let out a choked sound. Rage trembled in her hands. She raised the branch slightly. If she had stayed quiet, none of this would have happened. Elaine stepped in front of her again. "Put it down!" Brittany stepped forward instead. At that moment, the woods erupted with shouts. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Several officers surged into the clearing from both sides. Their steps were firm and fast. Their presence filled the space with authority so powerful it cut through the tension like a sudden gust of wind. Brittany jerked in surprise. She spun around as if searching for an escape route, but found only officers closing in. "Drop it!" one officer commanded. Her chest heaved. Sweat dripped down her chin. Her fingers trembled violently as she gripped the branch tighter. "You do not understand," she cried. "She ruined us." Evan took a stumbling step backward. Wait. We did not mean—" "Hands up," an officer ordered. Evan froze. For a moment, the heat, the dust, and the tension all seemed to thicken around them. The clearing felt like a pressure chamber on the verge of exploding. Brittany let out one final cry and lifted the branch over her shoulder. Officers rushed forward. Two seized her arms. One knocked the branch from her grasp. It hit the ground with a hollow thud. Brittany screamed as they forced her wrists together and secured them with cuffs. Her cries echoed through the clearing, filled with anger and wild panic. Evan stumbled backward as officers advanced on him, but instead of resisting, he turned sharply and bolted through a narrow path between the trees, disappearing into the woods again. Officers immediately sprinted after him, their shouts fading into the distance. The clearing fell into a tense silence. Elaine dropped to her knees beside Hannah once more. She gently lifted her daughter's head into her lap, brushing the sweat from her forehead. "You are safe," she whispered. "No one will touch you now." Hannah's fingers twitched weakly. Her eyes flickered open for a moment before closing again. Elaine held her hand. "Stay with me," she murmured. "Help is almost here." A distant rumble vibrated through the air. Elaine lifted her head. The sound grew louder. A helicopter. The rescue team was finally coming. The sunlight continued to blaze down, but for the first time since the nightmare began, Elaine felt the heat ease from her heart. Help was close, very close. The rescue team reached the clearing within minutes, guided by the frantic radio calls from the officers on the ground. The blades of the helicopter beat the air overhead, sending bursts of wind that stirred dust and pine needles across the forest floor. The roar of the engine grew louder as it hovered above a small open space just beyond the tree line. The paramedics moved quickly, carrying equipment and a folding stretcher as they emerged from the path leading into the clearing. Elaine stood back as the team surrounded her daughter. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. She watched every movement the paramedics made, unable to look away, even for a moment. One of them knelt beside Hannah and checked her pulse. Another placed 2 fingers beneath her jaw. A third gently lifted Hannah's eyelids with a gloved hand. "She is dehydrated and overheated," one paramedic said. "Her breathing is shallow. We need to get her cooled down and on oxygen right away." Elaine stepped closer. "Please help her," she whispered. "She has been in the sun too long." "We will," the paramedic said. "She is strong. She is still responsive." They lifted Hannah carefully, sliding the stretcher beneath her and securing straps across her chest and legs. Hannah let out a faint sound, a mixture of pain and exhaustion. Elaine bent over her and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "I am right here," she whispered. "Do not be afraid. You are safe now." Hannah's eyelids fluttered weakly, her lips parted, but her voice was barely audible beneath the noise of the helicopter. A paramedic lowered an oxygen mask over her face and adjusted the strap behind her head. A soft hiss filled the air as the oxygen began to flow. Hannah's breathing eased slightly. "Let's move," the lead paramedic said. They lifted the stretcher and began carrying it toward the helicopter. The wind from the blades whipped Elaine's clothes and hair as she hurried alongside them. Her hands never left the metal rail of the stretcher. She refused to let go. As they approached the helicopter, an officer opened the door and stepped aside. Elaine climbed in first, settling into a seat beside the stretcher. Her fingers closed around Hannah's hand, holding it firmly yet gently. Hannah's grip was faint but present. Elaine felt the small pressure and swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Inside the helicopter, the medical team worked quickly. They wiped Hannah's face with cool pads and monitored her pulse. The sound of the rotor blades thundered overhead, shaking the cabin with each rotation. The paramedic sitting opposite Elaine leaned forward slightly. "She is stabilizing," he said, "but she needs fluids and monitoring. The hospital is ready for her arrival." Elaine nodded. Her eyes never left her daughter. As the helicopter lifted off, sunlight rushed across the windows, turning everything white for a moment. The clearing below shrank. The trees blended into a patchwork of green and gold. The officers on the ground became small figures moving purposefully around the scene. And somewhere in that forest, Evan was still running. Deep in the woods, Evan pushed through branches and stumbled over roots as he tried to flee. His breath tore through his chest. Sweat, dirt, and panic coated his face. Every shout from the officers behind him made his heart slam painfully against his ribs. He could hear them. They were closer every second. He spotted the outline of his car through the trees. It was hidden behind a fallen log near a dirt path that fed into the main road outside Sun Peak Woods. Evan sprinted toward it, his legs burning, lungs screaming for relief. He yanked the door open and practically threw himself into the driver's seat. His hands shook violently as he jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered to life. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on." He slammed the car into gear and hit the accelerator. The tires spun in the loose dirt before lurching forward. The vehicle bounced wildly over rocks and ruts, swerving between the dense trees. Behind him, sirens shrieked. 2 patrol vehicles burst through the brush, their tires kicking up dirt as they began the chase. "Stop the vehicle," a voice called through the loudspeaker. "Put both hands on the wheel and pull over immediately." Evan pressed the accelerator harder. Branches whipped against the sides of the car. The frame rattled with each violent bump. He glimpsed the officers behind him through the mirror. They were not slowing down. He aimed for the narrow opening that led toward the main road. But the speed, the uneven ground, and the sheer panic coursing through his body created a deadly combination. As he rounded a sharp bend near a cluster of tall pine trunks, the front tires lost traction. The car veered. Evan jerked the wheel instinctively. The vehicle slid sideways. Dirt sprayed into the air as the car skidded across the ground and slammed violently into a massive tree. The impact exploded through the forest with a deep metallic crunch. The windshield spiderwebbed. The airbags burst forward, crushing Evan back into the seat. For a moment, there was only a ringing in his ears and the distant echo of sirens. Then the doors were yanked open. Multiple officers surrounded the car. One grabbed Evan's arm, another pulled him out and dragged him toward the ground. A third officer positioned himself in front of Evan, hand on his holster, ready if Evan resisted. "Do not move," the officer closest to him shouted. "Put your hands behind your back." "Lot." Evan groaned, dazed and furious. "This was not supposed to happen," he muttered. "She did this. She ruined everything." "Put your hands behind your back," the officer repeated. Evan resisted for a second, twisting his shoulders, but the officers forced him down across the hood of the patrol car. His cheek pressed against the hot metal. The cuffs snapped around his wrists. "Evan Miles," the lead officer said loudly. "You are under arrest for kidnapping, assault on a pregnant woman, and attempted murder." Evan let out a hoarse cry, part rage and part disbelief. "It was never my fault," he yelled. "You do not understand. None of this was my fault." But the officers did not respond. They guided him into the back of the patrol vehicle while he continued to shout and thrash. High above the forest, the helicopter carrying Hannah and Elaine soared toward the hospital. Inside the cabin, a voice crackled through the crew's radio. "Be advised," the dispatcher said. "Suspect Evan Miles is in custody." Elaine's breath caught. She looked down at her daughter, brushed her thumb across Hannah's knuckles, and whispered, "It is over. You are safe." For the first time since the nightmare began, Hannah managed a faint, fragile smile from behind her oxygen mask, and as the helicopter pressed forward toward safety, the last glimpse of Sun Peak Woods disappeared behind them, swallowed by light. The helicopter descended toward St. Mary's Hospital in Colorado just as the late afternoon sun began to soften across the valley. Its blades cut through the thick air, sending a powerful wind across the landing pad, where a trauma team waited in crisp uniforms and ready hands. The moment the wheels touched the ground, the paramedics released the latch and swung the cabin door open. Dust and leaves swirled in circles around them as they pulled Hannah's stretcher out of the aircraft. Elaine climbed down right behind them, blinking against the strong downdraft as she hurried to keep up. Hannah lay motionless beneath the straps, her face pale and her body weak. The oxygen mask covered the lower half of her face, and her breathing remained shallow. The paramedics pushed the stretcher across the pad toward the sliding doors of the emergency wing. Elaine followed closely, refusing to fall behind even for a heartbeat. Inside the hospital, the noise shifted from the roar of helicopter blades to the steady rhythm of monitors and the shuffle of urgent footsteps. Nurses rushed out from the triage station, guiding the stretcher through a long corridor brightly lit with fluorescent lights. Doctors surrounded Hannah, checking her vitals, assigning orders, speaking in calm urgency. "She is severely dehydrated," one doctor said. "Pulse is unstable. Blood pressure is dropping. Prepare fluids," another said. "Start oxygen at a higher rate. We need fetal monitoring as soon as she is stabilized." Elaine moved aside only when a nurse gently pulled her back so the team could work. She pressed her hands against her lips, praying silently as she watched the doctors swarm around her daughter. Everything inside her ached as she heard the clipped exchanges of the medical staff. "Can you hear me, Hannah?" a nurse asked as she checked her pupils. "We are here. You are going to be all right." Hannah did not answer. She drifted somewhere between wakefulness and unconsciousness, her head lolling slightly to one side as the doctors guided the stretcher into a nearby trauma room. The doors swung shut in Elaine's face, leaving her alone in the hallway. She felt her knees weaken for a moment, and she gripped the railing along the wall for support. Her breath hitched as she heard muffled instructions behind the closed doors. "We need to cool her down. Start the IV now. Monitor the baby's heart rate." Elaine pressed her forehead against her hand and closed her eyes. She whispered a soft plea into the still air of the corridor. "Please save them both." Several minutes passed before a nurse stepped out from the room. Elaine rushed to her immediately. "Is she going to be all right?" she asked. The nurse spoke gently. "She is stable for now. She is exhausted and dehydrated, and her body has been under extreme stress. But her vitals are responding to treatment. We will move her to the ICU to monitor her and the baby closely." "And the baby," Elaine whispered. "Is my granddaughter still alive?" The nurse nodded. "There is a heartbeat. It is weak but steady. We will keep a close watch." Elaine covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Relief and fear flooded through her at the same time. The nurse placed a comforting hand on her arm. "You can see her soon," she said. Elaine nodded gratefully and took a seat outside the ICU wing. She wiped her tears with a trembling hand and waited, staring through the small window where she could see Hannah being moved into a private room filled with monitors. The soft beeping of the machines gave her something to cling to. Meanwhile, miles away at the county detention center, the night was unfolding very differently for Evan and Brittany. Brittany sat in a small interrogation room with her wrists cuffed to the table. Her hair was disheveled, and her eyes swollen from crying. The harsh lighting overhead reflected off the metal surface of the table. A detective stood across from her, arms crossed, a file of evidence resting in front of him. "You were part of this," the detective said. "We know you helped tie Hannah to the tree. We know you streamed it. We have your messages, your voice recordings. If you want any chance of leniency, now is the time to tell the truth." Brittany's lips trembled. "It was Evan," she said through a cracked voice. "He said I had to do it. He said it was the only way to prove she was lying. I did not want to hurt her. I just wanted him to love me." The detective leaned forward. "But you filmed her suffering. You threatened her life. You could have stopped it." Brittany sobbed into her hands. I know. I lost control. Everything got worse than I thought." In another room, Evan sat slumped in a chair, his wrists cuffed, his clothes torn from the chase and the crash. His eyes darted around as the detective placed photos and printed messages in front of him. "We have everything," the detective said. "The live stream, the texts, the audio clips, the footprints, Brittany's testimony. You orchestrated this." Evan shook his head. "She was lying. She always lies. That woman ruined everything." "No," the detective said. "You did." Back at Street, Mary's hospital, the world outside remained restless. News vans lined the sidewalks. Reporters stood in clusters delivering breaking updates. Flashing camera lights reflected against the glass doors of the hospital entrance. Crowds gathered with candles, flowers, and posters reading, "Justice for Hannah." The entire state seemed to be watching. Elaine finally stepped outside for a brief moment of air. She stood on the small balcony overlooking the parking lot, where journalists quickly rushed toward her. Microphones rose in front of her. "Miss Carter," one reporter called, "how is your daughter? What do you want to say to the community?" Elaine steadied her voice. "My daughter fought to stay alive today," she said. "Now we fight for justice, and for every woman who has been silenced or hurt the way she was." Lights flashed. People applauded softly from below the balcony. When Elaine returned to the ICU, she found Hannah lying still but breathing more comfortably. A gentle light glowed above the bed. The steady rhythm of the fetal monitor pulsed softly beside her. Hannah's eyelids fluttered as Elaine approached. "Mom," Hannah whispered. "I am here," Elaine said as she bent over and kissed her forehead. "The baby is alive." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she breathed. Elaine sat beside her and held her hand as the machines continued their steady, life-affirming rhythm. In that quiet moment, mother and daughter shared a fragile peace. Outside the ICU doors, officers prepared the paperwork to transfer Evan and Brittany to formal booking. The case would move to the courthouse next. The long night at the hospital was only beginning, but for the first time, hope filled the air. The morning sun rose clear and sharp over the Colorado mountains, sending long beams of golden light across the steps of the county courthouse. Reporters clustered near the entrance, their cameras ready, their voices low with anticipation. Inside, the sounds of quiet conversation echoed through the tall marble hallways as people filled the benches of the main courtroom. Everyone had come for one reason. Today was the day justice would finally be decided in broad daylight. Elaine pushed Hannah's wheelchair through the side entrance, guided by a hospital transport aide. Hannah sat wrapped in a soft blanket, her face pale but calmer than the day she had arrived at the hospital. A thin medical bracelet still encircled her wrist. Her breathing was steady now, and the faint rhythm of the baby's heartbeat had brought her strength during the long night in the ICU. The doctor had allowed her to leave temporarily for the hearing, but only with strict supervision. The hallway cleared as people recognized her. Conversations stopped. Several stood silently out of respect. Elaine kept her hands firm on the wheelchair handles as they approached the double doors of the courtroom. When they opened, dozens of heads turned at once. Inside, sunlight streamed in through tall windows, illuminating every corner of the room. The benches were packed with journalists, advocates for women's safety, community members, and families who had followed the case closely. Hannah felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest. It was not fear. It was something heavier, something long overdue. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. The judge entered and took his seat. Elaine parked the wheelchair in the front row, close to the witness stand. She placed a reassuring hand on Hannah's shoulder before sitting down. Across the room, Evan Miles was escorted in by two deputies. His wrists were cuffed, His hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled, and there was a deep tension in his jaw. He kept glancing around the courtroom, as if searching for a way to rewrite the reality unfolding before him. Beside him sat Brittany Cole, her face streaked with makeup from crying. Her hands trembled in her lap. She never lifted her eyes from the table. The judge cleared his throat. "We will now begin the evidentiary hearing regarding the charges against Evan Miles and Brittany Cole." Hull. The prosecutor stood and walked to the center of the room. He lifted a remote control and pressed a button. The large screen behind him lit up. The live stream began to play. There was no sound in the courtroom except the audio of the recording. The forest clearing appeared on the screen. The camera shook as voices argued off-frame. Then the terrible scene became clear. Hannah tied to the tree, Brittany holding a knife, Evan circling with the phone, the scorching sunlight, Hannah's pleading voice, Brittany's taunts, Evan's instructions. Some in the courtroom gasped softly, others pressed their hands to their mouths. The images were brutal, they were undeniable. The prosecutor let the entire clip play, not cutting a single second. The room watched until the video ended on the distorted frame of the tree. When the screen went dark, the prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this is the full, unedited video as recorded by defendant Brittany Cole and streamed live to multiple viewers across the country." He turned again and held up a folder thick with printed pages. "We also have the messages exchanged between the defendants. These include detailed discussions about humiliating the victim and manipulating public perception. There are voice recordings of defendant Evan Miles planning the event. And we have the testimony of the officers who recovered the evidence and arrested the defendants." The judge nodded. "Proceed with your witnesses." A forensic specialist took the stand first. She confirmed the authenticity of the live stream and digital files. Next came the lead detective who described the chase, the crash, and the arrest. Then the attending trauma physician explained Hannah's condition upon arrival at the hospital. Her life was in immediate danger, the doctor said. Severe dehydration, heat stress, and physical trauma placed both her and the unborn child at high risk. If she had remained tied to that tree much longer, neither would have survived. Hannah closed her eyes as she listened. Elaine held her hand tightly. When it was Brittany's turn to speak, she rose slowly, supported by a deputy. Her voice shook as she addressed the court. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I was wrong. I did everything Evan told me to do. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid of losing him. He said we had to scare her. He said she deserved it. I believed him. I thought he loved me. I did not mean for it to go that far. I am sorry." Her sobs filled the room. The judge watched her carefully, taking notes. Then Evan stood. At first he tried to remain calm, but when the prosecutor asked why he tied his wife to a tree, he snapped. "She lies," he shouted. "She lies about everything. She wanted to make me look bad. She tried to ruin my life." "Did she tie herself?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Evan insisted. "She is manipulative. She does this for attention." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "So she tied herself while 7 months pregnant, positioned the camera, and then begged for mercy while you filmed her?" Evan stammered. "She provoked us. You do not understand." The prosecutor's voice remained steady. "The video shows you tightening the rope. The video shows you laughing while she cried. The messages show you planned this. You orchestrated a violent act against a pregnant woman." Evan's mouth opened, but no words emerged. For the first time, he looked genuinely cornered. The judge leaned forward. "I have heard enough." The entire courtroom held its breath. "In the matter of the state of Colorado versus Evan Miles and Brittany Cole," the judge said, "this court finds the defendants guilty on all charges." A ripple moved through the room. "For defendant Evan Miles," the judge continued, "the sentence is 40 years in federal custody for kidnapping, aggravated assault on a pregnant woman, and attempted murder." Evan's knees nearly buckled as he was pulled back toward the deputies. For defendant Brittany Cole, the sentence is 25 years for her role as an accomplice in these acts. Brittany sobbed into her hands as she was led away. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. The sound of justice spoken aloud felt like a long exhale she had been holding in for days. Elaine wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. Hannah leaned into her, overwhelmed by relief. "You are safe now," Elaine whispered. "It is over." The camera shutters clicked rapidly. The prosecutor shook hands with his team. Several people stood and clapped softly. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating Hannah's face with a warm glow, as if the entire room were opening toward hope. A nurse approached Hannah's wheelchair. "We need to take you back to the hospital for monitoring." Hannah nodded. Her tears sparkled in the light. As she was wheeled out of the courtroom, she took one last look at the emptying benches and the judge's bench glowing under the late morning Sunday justice had been delivered. The darkness of Sun Peak Woods had finally been forced into the light. The doors closed behind them, ending the chapter and leading her into the next. 1 month had passed since the verdict, yet the memory of the courtroom still lived somewhere deep in Hannah's chest. The echoes of the judge's voice had stayed with her during every quiet moment in the hospital. Now, as the soft morning light streamed through the windows of Street Mary's, she sat upright in her bed while a nurse gently removed the last monitor from her arm. The room felt warmer today, calmer, almost like the world had finally decided to allow her to breathe again. The obstetrician reviewed the final chart with a thoughtful expression, then smiled. "Your baby is strong," she said. "Her heartbeat is steady. You are still recovering, so you will need follow-ups every week, but you are stable enough to go home today." Hannah nodded slowly as relief washed over her. Home. The word felt foreign after everything she had endured. But she was ready, more ready than she had ever been. Elaine entered the room with a small bag of folded clothes, her face full of tenderness. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "your discharge papers are ready." Hannah reached out, and her mother immediately took her hand. They did not need words. The connection between them had become a lifeline, something that had carried both of them through the darkest days. Together, they packed the few things Hannah kept at her bedside. Then they walked out of the hospital wing, one slow step at a time, with the gentle thumping of baby Grace as a reminder that the story had not ended in the forest. Outside, the crisp Colorado air brushed against Hannah's skin. Elaine helped her into the passenger seat of the car. They began the short drive back to Elaine's small house at the edge of Beacon Ridge. The mountains stretched high above them, capped with snow that sparkled beneath the afternoon sunday. For the first time in a long while, Hannah looked at the landscape and felt something like safety. When they arrived, Elaine opened the front door to reveal a living room carefully prepared for her return. A soft blanket lay draped across the couch. A table near the window held flowers, fresh soup, and small gifts wrapped in tissue paper. Several envelopes were tucked neatly into a woven basket. Elaine placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "The community wanted to help," she said. "People have been dropping things off every day." Hannah walked inside with slow steps, her heart unexpectedly full. She picked up one envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "You are brave. You survived. We stand with you." There were dozens more like it. Cards from neighbors she barely knew, letters from women across Colorado, messages from families who had watched the live stream and had cried for her. She sat down on the couch, holding the letters against her chest. The healing did not come instantly. Some days, fear followed her like a shadow. She met with a therapist recommended by the hospital. During their first session, she sat across from the doctor with her hands folded protectively over her belly. Her voice shook as she described the horror of being tied to the tree. The therapist listened carefully, guiding her breath, helping her separate the fear from the memory. "You are not back in the woods," the therapist said gently. "You are here. Your baby is safe. And you survived." Those words stayed with Hannah long after she left the office. At home, she spent quiet afternoons speaking softly to Grace, resting her hands over the round curve of her belly. She often sat near the window where the sunlight fell warm on her skin. She told her daughter about courage, about fighting to stay alive, about the bond they carried. Sometimes Grace responded with a gentle kick, and those moments became the brightest part of her days. "We made it," Hannah whispered during one of those evenings. "You and me." As her strength returned, she began thinking about what would come next. Something inside her refused to let the pain be meaningless. One morning she approached Elaine in the kitchen. "I want to start something," she said. "Something bigger than me. A place where women can go when they are afraid. A place where they know they are not alone." Elaine listened quietly, then smiled with pride. "Tell me what you need," she said. "Over the next few weeks, Hannah worked with local advocates, counselors, and volunteers to form an organization she named the Sunlight Shelter Foundation. The name came from the moment she remembered waking in the forest, the sunlight fighting through the trees during her worst hour. She wanted the same light to guide women who were still lost in their own darkness. The foundation grew quickly. Donations came from neighbors, churches, and even strangers who had followed her case. Soon they were ready to open their first small center in Beacon Ridge. The day of the opening arrived with clear skies and a warm breeze. A small crowd gathered outside the building. Reporters stood nearby. Families held signs of support. Hannah stepped toward the podium wearing a simple dress, her belly full and round with the life she had fought for. Elaine stood just behind her, her eyes glowing with pride. When Hannah began to speak, her voice trembled only for a moment before gaining strength. "They tied me to a tree to break me," she said, "but the sunlight saved me, and today that same light stands here with us. If I survived, then other women can survive. If I found help, then others should never have to search alone. This shelter is for them, for anyone who has been silenced, hurt, or afraid. You are not alone, not anymore." Lay? Applause rose around her, soft at first, then growing louder as more people wiped tears from their eyes. Hannah stepped back from the microphone, breathing deeply, feeling the fullness of the moment. Elaine wrapped her arms around her daughter from behind. Hannah covered her belly with both hands. Grace shifted gently beneath her skin as if acknowledging the warmth of the world waiting for her. A photographer captured the moment. 3 generations, 3 stories intertwined by pain, resilience, and hope. It was a single snapshot of a family that had refused to collapse under darkness. As the event ended, Hannah walked slowly toward the edge of the field behind the shelter. The afternoon sun lit everything in a soft gold. The wind carried the faint scent of pine. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth, letting the light settle across her skin. The chapter that had once nearly destroyed her had now become the beginning of something larger, something restorative, something bright. She opened her eyes. Her future was waiting in the sunlight, and she walked toward it.
The 8 a.m. sun streamed through the immaculate floor-to-ceiling windows of the Lincoln Park townhouse, illuminating the cold white marble of the kitchen island. Emily Carter, or as she was known here, Emily Lawson, brushed a strand of mousy brown hair from her face, her hand trembling slightly. She stared at the grocery list, a monument to her mundane existence. Organic yogurt, strawberry, not raspberry. Mom's medication, Crestview Pharmacy only. Sourdough bread, fresh. Chicken breasts, skinless. She was 7 months pregnant. The small life inside her was her only comfort, her one secret joy in a life that felt increasingly like a performance. "Emily, where's my coffee?" Ryan Lawson, her husband, strode into the kitchen, already in a crisp Tom Ford suit. He didn't look at her, his eyes already on his phone. "It's on the counter, honey," she said, her voice soft. He grunted, taking a sip. "It's lukewarm. Again. Can you not manage one simple task?" Before she could apologize, a second voice, light and mocking, drifted in. "Seriously, Em, you're nesting, not hibernating." Pick up the pace. Samantha, Ryan's sister, lounged against the doorframe, wrapped in a silk robe, her blonde hair perfectly tousled. She'd been living with them for 6 months, ever since she'd run into some trouble back home in Ohio. "And Em," Samantha said, picking a piece of lint off Ryan's shoulder, her fingers lingering. "When you go out, can you get me that new sculpting cream from Neiman's? Ryan, it's just so expensive, but you said it was fine, right?" "Whatever you want, Sam," Ryan said, smiling at her. It was a smile Emily hadn't seen directed at her in years. Emily felt a familiar, cold knot tighten in her stomach, right above the swell of her baby. The intimacy between them was palpable, a suffocating static in the air. I have to pick up your mum's medication," Emily said, grabbing the list. "The pharmacy in Crestview. It's the only one that stocks it. Then you'd better get going, Ryan said, dismissing her. And for God's sake, try not to be late. You know Mom hates waiting. She's coming for dinner. He and Samantha shared another look, a quick, conspiratorial glance that shut Emily out completely. As Emily waddled out the door, her oversized coat failing to hide her belly, she felt the oppressive weight of her choices. She had run from a life of crushing expectation, of life and death pressure, of being Dr. Carter, the hand of God. She had run straight into the arms of Ryan Lawson, a charming, ambitious pharmaceutical salesman who promised her a normal life. A quiet life. She had wanted to be anonymous. She had just wanted to be Emily. But as she stepped into the cold Chicago wind, the normal life she'd chosen felt more like a prison than the one she'd fled. And she was beginning to realize that the bars weren't made of steel, but of strawberry yogurt and lukewarm coffee. The drive to Crestview, an exclusive suburb north of the city, took nearly an hour in traffic. Emily's back ached, and the baby was kicking restlessly, as if it too felt the suffocating pressure. The Crestview pharmacy was less a pharmacy and more a high-end boutique that happened to sell prescription drugs. She handed the script for Eleanor Lawson's specialty compound to the pharmacist, then went to find the yogurt. As she navigated the aisle, her mind drifted. She hadn't told Ryan the truth. Not the whole truth. He knew she came from a comfortable family, but he had no idea about Carter Enterprises, the multi-billion-dollar medical empire her father had built. He didn't know her siblings ran the largest private hospital network in the country. He didn't know she could buy and sell his entire company, Lawson Pharmaceuticals, with a single phone call. She had been so desperate to escape the pressure, the ghosts of the operating room, the one case that had broken her. She had wanted to be loved for who she was, not for her name. Emily. The voice was deep, smooth, and struck her like a defibrillator. She froze, her hand hovering over the Chobani. She knew that voice. She hadn't heard it in 3 years, but she would know it anywhere. Slowly she turned. He looked exactly the same, only better. James Thompson, heir to the Thompson Group, the largest private equity firm in the nation. And her childhood friend. His dark hair was perfectly cut, his bespoke suit molded to his athletic frame. But it was his eyes, kind, intelligent, and now wide with disbelief, that undid her. "Emily Carter," he whispered, taking a step closer. "My God. I've been looking for you. For years." Panic, sharp and acidic, rose in her throat. I'm sorry," she stammered, clutching her coat. "You must have me confused with someone else. My name is Emily Lawson." James's expression hardened, his gaze dropping to her swollen belly, then back to her face, noting the exhaustion, the faded quality of her skin, the cheap coat. "Don't," he said, his voice low. "Don't lie to me, Em. I'd know you anywhere." "James, please," she begged, her eyes darting around the empty aisle. "You can't be here. He doesn't know." "Doesn't know what? That his wife is one of the most brilliant surgeons this country has ever produced? Or that your family has half of Chicago searching for you?" "Sis, is that you?" Another voice. Emily's blood ran cold. Her brother, Ethan Carter, rounded the corner, looking just as shocked as James. "Emily, what the hell? We thought you were... We didn't know. Are you okay? Who did this?" Ethan gestured, panicked, at her belly. "I'm fine," she hissed, desperate. "I'm married. I'm happy. This is the life I chose. Please, Ethan, you have to let me go." "Let you go?" Ethan looked outraged. "After you vanished, Dad's been..." "Ethan, stop," James interrupted, his voice a calm command. He looked at Emily, his eyes filled with a pained understanding she couldn't bear. "You're with Ryan Lawson, CEO of Lawson Pharmaceuticals. We've been..." vetting his company for a potential acquisition. Emily felt sick. James, no. Don't. Not yet. I'm pregnant. I just need a little more time to tell him myself. Please. James studied her for a long, agonizing moment. He saw the desperation, the fear, and something else. The deep, profound unhappiness she was trying so hard to hide. "You're in trouble, aren't you?" he said. It wasn't a question. "No," she lied. I have to go. My mother-in-law is waiting." She grabbed the yogurt and fled, leaving James and Ethan standing in the aisle, their faces a mixture of fury and devastating concern. As she drove away, she was shaking so hard she could barely hold the wheel. The walls she had built around her normal life were crumbling, and she knew, with terrifying certainty, that the past was about to collide with the present. She arrived home to a house buzzing with tension. Eleanor Lawson, Ryan's mother, was already there, perched on a sofa, her face a mask of disapproval. "You're late, Emily," Eleanor snipped, not even looking up from her magazine. "My prescription." "I have it right here, Eleanor," Emily said, breathless, placing the bag on the coffee table. "And you made the soup?" This from Samantha, who was giving Ryan a neck rub. I'm about to start it," Emily said, moving toward the kitchen. "Unbelievable," Samantha scoffed. "She's home for 2 minutes and already behind. Ryan, honey, your neck is so tense. You work too hard." "It's this Thompson Group deal, Sam," Ryan sighed, leaning into her touch. "If I land this, we're set. Everything changes." Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. "James, he's vetting Ryan's company." She fled to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she chopped vegetables for the chicken noodle soup. She could hear them murmuring in the living room. Ryan's deep voice, Samantha's light laugh. She felt like an intruder in her own home. She brought the hot soup out on a tray. As she leaned over to place a bowl in front of Samantha, Samantha's foot shot out, accidentally, tripping her. Emily stumbled, and the bowl of boiling soup flew from her hands, splashing directly onto Samantha's arm and chest. Samantha let out a blood-curdling scream. "Ah, she did it on purpose! Emily, you witch!" "What the hell, Emily?" Ryan leaped up, rushing to Samantha, pushing Emily aside. "Sam, baby, are you okay?" He cradled Samantha, his hands roaming over her silk robe, his voice frantic with a concern he never showed Emily. "Ryan, it hurts," Samantha sobbed, burying her face in his chest. Emily stood frozen, the words echoing in her ears. "Sam, baby." Her eyes locked on Ryan's neck. He was still wearing the suit from this morning, but his collar was open, and there, just below his jawline, was a dark, purplish mark. A hickey. The room went silent. The air crackled. The soup, the pharmacy, the exhaustion, it all focused into one single, horrifying point of clarity. "Ryan," Emily's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room. "What is that on your neck?" Ryan froze. Samantha's sobs hitched. It's a rash," Ryan stammered, pulling his collar up. "You're lying," Emily said, her voice gaining strength. She looked at Samantha, who was clinging to Ryan, a smirk already playing on her lips. "She's not your sister, is she?" Ryan's face, which had been pale with panic, flushed with rage. "You're hysterical, Emily. The pregnancy is making you crazy." "How long?" Emily demanded, the words tearing from her throat. "How long have you been sleeping with your sister?" "You've had Ryan to yourself for long enough," Samantha suddenly shrieked, her victim act vanishing. "It's time for you to disappear, you boring cow." The venom in her voice was shocking, but not as shocking as what happened next. Ryan, enraged at being caught, his Thompson deal flashing before his eyes, his entire life imploding, turned on Emily. "You!" he roared. "You're going to ruin everything." He shoved her. Hard! It wasn't a small push. It was a violent, two-handed shove, fueled by pure, adulterous rage. Emily, 7 months pregnant and unbalanced, had no chance. She flew backward, her back slamming into the sharp, unforgiving marble edge of the kitchen island. A pain, unlike anything she had ever known, ripped through her. It was a sharp, searing tear. She looked down. Blood. A dark, terrifying crimson, soaking through her maternity dress. The room spun. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Ryan and Samantha's faces, pale with horror, not at her pain, but at the consequences. "My baby," Emily whispered as she crumpled to the floor. "My baby." The fluorescent lights of the hospital ceiling flickered above her, sterile and indifferent. Emily woke to the rhythmic, agonizing beep of a heart monitor and a hollow, cavernous emptiness inside her. The pain in her abdomen was dull, but the pain in her soul was an abyss. "She's awake." She turned her head. A young, tired-looking doctor stood beside her. "Mrs. Lawson," he began, his voice laced with professional pity. "I'm Dr. Wells. You suffered a severe placental abruption from the trauma. We did everything we could, but he didn't need to finish." Emily knew. The small, fluttering life that had been her anchor, her one reason for enduring this sham of a life, was gone. A sob, dry and raw, tore from her throat. She had saved hundreds of lives, husbands, wives, mothers, and she couldn't save her own child. "He killed my baby," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "He killed her." "The police are outside, Mrs. Lawson," Dr. Wells said gently. "They'd like to take your statement about the fall." It wasn't a fall. The door to the hospital room opened, but it wasn't the police. It was James Thompson. His face was a thundercloud of controlled fury. Behind him stood her brother, Ethan, and her sister, Natalie, who was already in scrubs. "Get out," Natalie Carter, a formidable woman who ran the Carter Memorial ER, said to Dr. Wells. "We're taking over her care." Dr. Wells looked startled, then saw the Carter Memorial badges. "Of course, Dr. Carter. Right away." The door shut, leaving Emily alone with her family. Ethan knelt by her bed, his voice cracking. We came as soon as James called. We knew something was wrong. God, what did he do to you?" Emily just looked at James, who stood at the foot of the bed, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. "He's been having an affair with his stepsister, Samantha," James said, his voice flat and deadly. "The one living in his house. Our PI confirmed it an hour ago." "She's not his stepsister," Emily whispered, the tears finally coming, hot and agonizing. "I saw. He shoved me, and I lost her." Natalie let out a choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan looked murderous, but it was James's reaction that truly terrified her. He didn't rage, he didn't yell. A frightening calm settled over him. He pulled out his phone. "The police are handling the assault," he said. "We will handle the rest." He made a call. "It's done. Pull everything. Every contract. Every line of credit. I want Lawson Pharmaceuticals a smoking crater by morning. And contact the SEC. I want a full audit of his books. He's been cooking them to look good for our acquisition." "He's finished." He hung up. Emily looked at him, her grief momentarily overshadowed by the sheer, devastating power he wielded. "I'm going to divorce that bastard," she said, her voice hoarse. "No," James said, walking to her side. He gently brushed the matted hair from her face, his touch surprisingly tender. "Divorce is too simple. You're not just going to divorce him, Emily. You're going to ruin him. The normal life is over. It's time for Dr. Carter to come home." The numbness in Emily's heart began to recede, replaced by something new. It was cold, it was sharp, and it was clarifying. It was rage. She had run from who she was, and it had cost her everything. Now, her past was the only weapon she had left. "Get me my lawyer," she said, her voice no longer a whisper. "And get me the chief of surgery at Carter Memorial. I'm coming back." 2 weeks later, the grief was a constant, physical weight, but Emily channeled it. She had moved into James's penthouse on the Gold Coast, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the lake. Her siblings, Ethan and Natalie, were a constant presence, shielding her from the legal fallout, handling the funeral arrangements for the baby she never got to hold. Ryan had been calling, leaving frantic, terrified, and then abruptly furious voicemails. His world was collapsing. The assault charge, backed by the medical evidence, was proceeding. But the real damage was financial. "Emily, pick up. What did you do? The banks are calling in my loans. The Thompson deal is dead. You're destroying me." "You ungrateful witch. After everything I gave you, you'll never see a cent from me." "Please, Em, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. It was Sam. She pushed me. Come home, we can fix this." Emily deleted them all without listening to the end. Today she was back at Carter Memorial, not as a patient, but as a doctor. She stood in the locker room, the familiar blue scrubs feeling like armor. She was just observing rounds, a simple consultation, a way to dip her toe back into the world she'd abandoned. "Dr. Carter, welcome back." Dr. Peterson, the current chief of surgery, greeted her with a respect she hadn't felt in years. "We have a complex case in the ICU, 65-year-old female, post-op complications from a routine cholecystectomy at an outside hospital. She's in cardiac distress, BP is crashing, and her abdomen is rigid." Emily nodded, her mind instantly shifting. The familiar calculus of symptoms and solutions clicked into place. Internal bleeding, classic signs. "Let's go." They walked into the ICU bay, and Emily stopped dead. Hooked up to the ventilator, her skin a waxy grey colour, was Eleanor Lawson, Ryan's mother, and sitting in the corner, his head in his hands, was Ryan. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and wild. When he saw Emily, he leaped to his feet. "You!" he shrieked. "What are you doing here? Get away from her. Isn't it enough that you bankrupted me? Now you're here to finish the job?" "Mr. Lawson, you need to calm down," Dr. Peterson said, stunned. "This is Dr. Emily Carter. She's the best damn surgeon in this state." "She's my ex-wife," Ryan yelled, his voice cracking. "She's a housewife. She couldn't even make coffee. She's not a doctor." Emily ignored him. She never took her eyes off the monitor. "BP is 60/40 and dropping. She's deteriorating rapidly. Conservative treatment won't work. We're out of time." She looked at Ryan, her gaze flat and devoid of all emotion. "Your mother has a massive internal bleed, likely a nicked artery from her first surgery. Without an immediate operation, she will be dead in 30 minutes. No, this is ridiculous. You're trying to scare me," Ryan stammered. "Dr. Peterson," Emily said, "all business. Get her to OR3. Now, I'll assist. You're the primary, but I'll guide you." "Assist? Dr. Carter, with all due respect, you should be primary," Peterson said. Emily looked at Ryan's terrified, pathetic face. The face of the man who had killed her child. She felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt the old, familiar ice of the operating room. The calm. The control. "I will not let that woman touch my mother," Ryan screamed. "Then your mother dies," Emily said, turning to walk away. "Wait!" Ryan choked out. Please, save her. I'll do anything." Emily paused, her back to him. "I don't need anything from you, Ryan. I'm just doing my job." She walked into the scrub room, the familiar scent of antiseptic soap washing over her. As she scrubbed in, she felt the last vestiges of Emily Lawson fall away. This was who she was. She was the hand of God. And God was about to be merciless. She entered the OR. Scalpel. The surgery was a masterpiece of brutal efficiency. Dr. Peterson, a competent surgeon, was quickly overwhelmed. The bleeding. I can't find the source, he muttered, his hands frantic. Suction, Emily commanded, her voice calm. There, the hepatic artery. Clamp. No, not that one. The GDA, right there. Her hands moved with a speed and precision that was almost terrifying. She didn't just see the organs. She saw the pathways, the solutions. In less than 40 minutes, she had located the bleed, repaired the artery, and was closing. My God, Dr. Carter, Peterson whispered, awestruck. I've never seen anything like it. The medical field lost a star when you stepped away. Emily just stripped off her gloves. She'll be stable in an hour. Inform her son. She walked out of the OR, bypassing the waiting room where Ryan sat, and went straight to James, who was waiting in her new, temporary office. It's done, she said. How do you feel? He asked, searching her face. I feel like myself. Good, James said, a small, proud smile touching his lips. Because the Lawson Pharmaceuticals annual gala is tonight, or what's left of it. He's hemorrhaging investors, but he's throwing this party as a last-ditch effort to look stable. He's telling everyone he's about to sign a new, massive deal. He's delusional, Emily said. He is, and I think it's time everyone saw just who he was dealing with. James held up a garment bag. Inside was a stunning, midnight blue couture gown. Your armor, Dr. Carter. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel was half empty. Ryan stood on stage, a microphone in his hand, a sheen of desperate sweat on his forehead. Samantha, dressed in a gaudy red dress, was clinging to his arm. And I promise you, Ryan was saying, his voice too loud, that Lawson Pharmaceuticals is stronger than ever. We are on the verge of a historic partnership that will... The grand doors of the ballroom swung open. A spotlight, as if on cue, found the entrance. Emily Carter walked in. She was a vision of ice and fire. Her hair, no longer mousy, was styled in elegant waves. The blue dress clung to her, and around her neck was a staggering diamond necklace, the legendary Carter North Star diamond. On her arm was James Thompson. The room fell silent. The few remaining investors and journalists turned as one. Emily? Ryan choked, stepping down from the stage. What are you doing here? You look... What am I doing here, Ryan? Emily's voice was clear and cold, carrying across the silent room. I was just wondering who this historic partnership was with, because it's not with the Thompson Group. A gasp rippled through the crowd. James, Ryan stammered, turning to the man beside his wife. Mr. Thompson, this is a misunderstanding. This is my delusional ex-wife. She's... Your delusional ex-wife, James interrupted, his voice a silken, deadly blade, is Dr. Emily Carter, the youngest ever recipient of the Harrison Award for Surgical Innovation, and more to the point, the principal heiress to the Carter Medical Foundation, which, I might add, owns the patents on 3 of the drugs your company is currently failing to replicate. You could have heard a pin drop. Ryan's face drained of all color. He looked at Emily as if seeing her for the first time. You, a Carter, he whispered. You never asked, Emily said simply. And, James continued, enjoying himself, as of this morning, the Thompson Group, in partnership with Carter Enterprises, has acquired the debt of every lender you owe. Which means, as of right now, we own you, Ryan. Your company, your house, your car. Everything. Samantha let out a small shriek. You're broke, Emily said, stepping forward. You're a nobody, Ryan. And you're a terrible surgeon's husband. Ryan looked from Emily to James, his mind finally processing the absolute, total annihilation. But my mother. You saved her. That was Dr. Carter, Emily said. She took an oath, but I am done. Sign the divorce papers. You'll get nothing." She turned and, on James's arm, walked out of the ballroom, leaving Ryan Lawson in the smoking crater of his own life. Life for Ryan and Samantha became a living hell. They were evicted from the Lincoln Park townhouse, their assets frozen. Ryan's assault trial was pending, and his reputation was toxic. They were living in a cheap, extended-stay motel near O'Hare, a far cry from their former luxury. But Samantha was a survivor, and she was furious. "This isn't over, Ryan," she seethed, pacing the small, dingy room. "She thinks she's so smart, so powerful, but she's just a doctor, and doctors make mistakes." "What are you talking about, Sam?" Ryan said, listlessly. He was a broken man. "I still have connections," Samantha said, a sly look in her eye. "My old boss, Mr. Harrison, he always had a thing for me. He hates the Carters. He'll help us. We just need to ruin her reputation. Make it look like the hand of God isn't so steady after all." A week later, at Carter Memorial, a new patient was rushed into the ER. A man, 50s, complaining of a severe heart attack. His wife was hysterical. "Please, you have to save him," the wife cried. "It's his heart." Emily, who was on duty, immediately took charge. "Get him to triage. EKG, troponins, full panel, now!" But as Emily examined the patient, something felt wrong. "These symptoms, they don't align with cardiac arrest," she murmured. "His pupils are dilated. He's posturing. This isn't a heart attack. This is neurological. He needs an emergency craniotomy." "What?" the wife shrieked. "No, you're wrong. You're going to kill him. You're not qualified." "Ma'am, I am Dr. Carter. I am more than—" "I know who you are," the woman screamed. "You're that fraud, the one who bankrupted her husband. You're not touching him." Suddenly, a side door opened, and a half-dozen reporters, cameras flashing, burst into the ER. "Dr. Carter, is it true you're recommending a fatal procedure?" "Are you incompetent, doctor?" It was a setup. Emily felt the familiar panic rise, the ghost of her past failure, the one that made her flee years ago. Her hand started to tremble. "Easy," a voice said, low and steady. James Thompson was suddenly by her side, flanked by hospital security. "She's trying to save his life. He's stable for now," Emily said, her voice shaking but her medical certainty returning. "But he needs this surgery. Without it, his chances are slim. You are gambling with his life. We don't trust you. We're leaving." The wife began to wheel her husband out. "Let them go," James said quietly to security. Then he looked at Emily. "They won't get far." He made a call. "I have a tail on them. I want to know where they go and who they talk to." 2 hours later, James was back, his face grim. He held up a tablet. It was security footage from a diner, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. The grieving wife was sitting in a booth, laughing and accepting a thick envelope of cash from Samantha. And the dying patient? He was sitting next to her, eating a cheeseburger. "She paid them to set me up," Emily whispered, sickened. "It gets worse," James said. He pulled up another file. "This is from my PI. That Mr. Harrison Samantha is working for? He's a rival of your father's. And he's also her new lover. She's been playing him and Ryan." "Oh my God," Emily said. "They're at the hospital," an assistant said, rushing in. "Ryan and Samantha. They're here for some reason, and Ryan is threatening to have Dr. Carter arrested." Emily and James found them in the lobby. Ryan looked haggard, but Samantha was glowing, triumphant. "There she is," Samantha yelled, pointing at Emily. "The killer. That poor man is probably dead by now." "Actually," James said, projecting his voice for the reporters who were still lingering, "the dying patient is currently enjoying a patty melt at the Red Line Diner. We have the footage." He angled the tablet for the reporters to see. The image of the patient and his wife counting money with Samantha was undeniable. Samantha's face went white. "And as for you, Ryan," James continued, "your assault trial is next week, and we have a new piece of evidence." He nodded to a new person standing behind him, a man in a suit. "Mr. Lawson," the man said, "I'm from the IRS. It seems your little fraud to impress the Thompson Group went deeper than we thought. You're under arrest for tax evasion and securities fraud." Ryan looked at Samantha, his eyes wide with betrayal. "Sam, this was your idea." "Don't look at me," Samantha spat. "You're on your own." As two officers cuffed Ryan, he stared at Emily, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "This isn't over, Emily. I will destroy you. Get him out of here," Emily said, turning her back on him, her heart heavy. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and long hours at the hospital. Emily had officially rejoined the staff as Chief of Surgical Innovation. She was healing, slowly. The grief for her child was a shadow that never left, but her work gave her purpose. Her relationship with James was also changing. He was no longer just a protector. He was her partner. He'd sit in her office for hours while she finished charts, just to be near her. He'd bring her coffee. He'd listen. One night, a frantic call came into the ER. "Dr. Carter to the surgical bay, stat!" Natalie's voice crackled over the intercom. "We have a 30-week pregnant female, massive bleeding, critical condition. She's crashing." Emily ran. She burst into the trauma bay and stopped. The woman on the gurney, her face pale and covered in sweat, was Samantha. "Vitals are 60/40, a nurse yelled. "She's in shock. We're losing them both." James and Ethan had followed her. "Emily, no," Ethan said, grabbing her arm. "You don't owe her anything. Let someone else handle it." "She killed your baby, Em," James said, his voice tight with rage. "Let her go." Emily looked at the monitor. She looked at Samantha's terrified, pain-filled eyes, and she looked at the fetal heartbeat, faint and erratic. "It's not about her," Emily said, pulling on gloves. "It's about the baby. She has placenta previa with severe abruption. She needs an emergency C-section, and she needs it now. There's no time to transfer. Get her to the OR." "Emily, don't," James pleaded. "It's who I am, James," she said, meeting his gaze. "I can't let a child die. Not again." The OR was chaos. Samantha was crashing. "Heart rate is erratic, 140 and climbing." "I'm in," Emily said, her hands moving with lightning speed. "The uterus is torn. No wonder she's crashing. Clamp, suction. I need—" "There." She pulled the baby out. It was small, blue and silent. "No," Emily whispered. She began neonatal resuscitation, working on the tiny infant with a desperate, focused energy. Come on, breathe. Breathe, damn you." After an agonizing 30 seconds, the baby let out a tiny, thin wail. "We have a cry," the nurse said, tears in her eyes. Emily handed the baby off, her entire body shaking with relief. Then she turned back to Samantha, who was still bleeding out. "Now," she said, her voice hard as steel. "Let's save the mother. It took another hour, but she did it. She saved them both." She stood in the scrub room afterward, her body trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. James was waiting for her. He simply wrapped his arms around her and held her as she finally, truly, wept. Later that night, James came to her office. He was holding a file. "The blood work came back," he said, his face unreadable. "From the baby. And? We ran a paternity test against the sample we had from Ryan for the assault case." He slid the paper across the desk. "It's not his, Emily." Emily looked at the report. "Mr. Harrison," she guessed. "Or someone else," James said. "The point is, Ryan went to jail for fraud, believing she was carrying his child." "He's going to find out," Emily said. He already has, James replied, his face grim. He was just released on bail. Mr. Harrison paid it, and he's on his way here. Ryan stormed into the hospital, his eyes wild. He had seen the paternity report his lawyer had just received. He'd been played by Samantha, by Harrison, by everyone. He made his way to the maternity recovery wing. Samantha was alone, weak, the baby in a bassinet beside her. "Ryan," she whispered, a faint smile on her lips. "You're out. Did you see him? Our son?" "He's not my son, Samantha," Ryan said, his voice chillingly calm. Her smile vanished. What are you talking about? Of course he is." "I saw the test. Who is it? Harrison?" "Ryan, you're not well," she said, trying to sit up, her eyes darting to the call button. "You're just stressed." "You lying witch," he hissed, advancing on her. "I lost everything for you. My company, my wife, I lost everything." "You're pathetic, Ryan," she spat, her fear making her cruel. "A loser. Anyone would have left you eventually. I'm just the only one who hasn't. Yet." That was the final snap. He looked at her, his eyes completely empty. He saw the woman who had pushed him, manipulated him, and ultimately was the architect of his ruin. "If I can't have you," he whispered, "no one can." He lunged forward, grabbing the thick hospital pillow. "Ryan, no!" she screamed, but she was too weak from the surgery. He pressed the pillow over her face, his entire body shaking with a terrible final rage. "You did this," he muttered. "You did this all to me." He held it there. Her legs kicked feebly, and then were still. The heart monitor beside the bed, which had been beeping steadily, let out one long, final, piercing wail. Flatline. The door opened. Emily stood there, having come to check on her patient. Ryan turned, the pillow still in his hands. He looked at Emily, at the dead woman on the bed, and at the wailing baby in the bassinet, and he smiled, a terrifying, broken smile. "Look what you made me do, Emily," he said, his voice conversational. "You finally got what you wanted. You killed her." "Ryan, put the pillow down," Emily said, her voice shaking, but her doctor's calm kicking in. She hit the code blue button on the wall beside her. "It's too late for that," Ryan said, tossing the pillow aside. "She's gone, just like my company, just like my life. All because of you. Ryan, she betrayed you. I didn't." "You did," he roared. "You saved her life. You saved her, just so you could show me this. Show me that he wasn't mine. You wanted to destroy me? Congratulations, Emily. You win." Footsteps pounded down the hall. Nurses and security burst in. "He did it," Emily said, pointing. He suffocated her." "Liar!" Ryan screamed as security guards grabbed him. "She's lying. She's the doctor. She must have given her the wrong medication. She's incompetent. Check the charts. She killed her." "Get him out of here," Natalie ordered, rushing in and starting compressions on Samantha, though she knew it was futile. "Get him out." As they dragged Ryan away, he locked eyes with Emily. "I will not rest until you are in the ground, Emily. You hear me? In the ground." The next 24 hours were a nightmare. The police investigation, the autopsy, which quickly confirmed death by suffocation. Ryan was arrested, this time for first-degree murder. But the media storm was immediate. Billionaire IRS doctor at center of love, triangle murder. Jilted husband claims malpractice. The hospital board was in a panic. Emily's reputation, which she had just reclaimed, was being dragged through the mud. "This is exactly what he wanted," Emily said, sitting in James's living room, staring blankly at the TV. "He wanted to burn my world down, even if he had to burn with it." "He won't win," James said, his voice a steel rod. "The evidence is clear. He's a murderer." "It doesn't matter," Emily said. "The doubt is there. The taint. He's poisoned everything." The next day, James had to fly to New York for an emergency meeting. "I'll be back in 24 hours, he promised, kissing her. "Stay here. Don't go to the hospital. Let the lawyers handle this." But Emily couldn't sit still. She had to work. She went to the hospital, needing the normalcy of rounds. She was walking across the hospital's glass-enclosed atrium when she saw him, Ryan. He wasn't in cuffs. He was walking toward her, his face calm. How did you get out?" Emily whispered, backing away. "Connections," Ryan said, shrugging. "Turns out Mr. Harrison is very grateful to me for silencing his mistress. He posted my bail." "Funny, isn't it?" "You're insane," Emily said, her hand fumbling for her phone. "I told you I'd destroy you, Emily," he said, and his hand came out of his jacket pocket. He was holding a gun. "Ryan, no. You took everything from me. My wife, my son, my company, my life. It's only fair I take yours." He raised the gun. Emily closed her eyes, a strange sense of peace washing over her. She thought of her baby. A shot rang out, but she felt no pain. She opened her eyes. James Thompson was standing in front of her, his arm outstretched. He had thrown himself between them. A dark red stain was spreading across the front of his white shirt. "James!" she screamed. He looked at her, his eyes full of a love so profound it stole her breath, before he collapsed at her feet. Ryan stood there, stunned, just as security tackled him, the gun clattering to the marble floor. Emily dropped to her knees, her hands pressing against James's chest. No, James, stay with me. I need a gurney. I need a crash cart. Stay with me." He whispered, his hand weakly finding hers. "Always. Knew. I'd take a bullet for you." "Don't talk," she sobbed, the surgeon's mask completely gone, replaced by the terrified woman underneath. "Don't you dare leave me, James Thompson. Do you hear me? Don't you dare!" The bullet had hit James in the shoulder, tearing through the brachial plexus. It was a serious, debilitating injury. But Emily, in a blur of terrifying, focused rage, had been in the OR, guiding the vascular surgeon's hands, saving his. She sat by his bedside for 2 days, refusing to leave. When he finally woke up, his eyes found hers instantly. "Hey," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Hey," she replied, her voice thick with tears. She laid her head on his chest, right next to his bandaged shoulder. "You stupid, brave, idiotic man. You could have died. Worth it," he murmured, his good hand coming up to stroke her hair. "Ryan? Gone," Emily said. "For good. First-degree murder. Attempted murder. Harrison's lawyers dropped him. He'll never see the light of day again. And the baby? He's in the NICU. He's strong. He'll be okay." Emily sat up, wiping her eyes. "My family is fostering him, until a permanent adoption can be found." "Good," James said. He looked at her, his gaze intense. "Emily, when I thought I was... when he pulled that trigger, my only regret was that I never told you." "Told me what?" "That I've loved you since we were kids. That when you disappeared, it broke my heart. That watching you with him, watching you fade, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. James, I'm not saying it to pressure you, Em. I'm just done with secrets." Emily looked at this man who had, quite literally, walked through fire for her. He had seen her at her lowest, broken and lost. He had seen her at her most powerful, a queen of the OR. He had protected her, respected her, and loved her through all of it. He hadn't fallen in love with Emily Lawson, the housewife, or Dr. Carter, the legend. He had just loved her. She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of gratitude. It was a kiss of arrival. A kiss that felt like coming home. "I'm not running anymore, James," she whispered against his lips. "Not from my name, not from my past, and not from this." "Good," he smiled, wincing slightly. because I'm not sure I can throw myself in front of any more bullets for you. My shoulder is killing me." She laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt new and ancient all at once. It was the sound of her life, finally, beginning. 6 months later, the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. Dr. Emily Carter, chief of surgery, stood on the balcony of the Carter Memorial's new trauma wing, a wing funded entirely by the Thompson Carter Foundation. She held a cup of tea, the chill of the spring air biting at her cheeks. The hospital was quiet behind her. Ryan Lawson was serving a life sentence. His mother, Eleanor, had recovered and, in a strange twist, had written Emily a letter of profound apology. The baby, adopted by a loving couple, was thriving. The door to the balcony opened. James walked out, his arm no longer in a sling, though he still favored it. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "You're thinking too loud, Dr. Carter," he murmured, kissing her temple. "I'm just thinking," she said, leaning into his warmth, "about how a life can burn to the ground, and something new can grow from the ashes. Something stronger." "That's the thing about ashes, Em," he said. "They make for very fertile soil." She turned in his arms, her eyes clear and bright, finally free of the ghosts. She was no longer the runaway doctor or the broken housewife. She was just Emily. And that was more than enough. Betrayal can feel like the end of the world. But as Emily's story shows us, sometimes the most devastating endings are just the beginning of our most powerful comebacks. We all have a Dr. Carter inside of us, a strength we've hidden away, waiting for the right moment to reclaim our power. Thank you for walking through this journey of heartbreak, resilience, and redemption with us. If Emily's fight for a new beginning touched your heart, please let us know in the comments. What part of her story resonated with you the most? Your stories give us all strength, and if you enjoy dramatic stories about real-life challenges and finding the courage to start over, please like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new chapter in our collection of powerful, emotional stories. We're so grateful to have you here. We'll see you in the next one.